I didn't know I was watching God answer my prayers until everything started changing. The air was filled with wealth and prestige as Miami's elite gathered for the annual gala at the most prestigious hotel in the city. Invitation only. Crystal lights reflected off towering chandeliers, scattering soft white light across marble floors. Gowns shimmered. Tuxedos were tailored to perfection. Smiles, laughter, and quiet conversations about investments and influence floated through the room like perfume. This was Miami's finest, gathered under one roof. Isabella Hale stood near the bar, wrapped in a beautiful silhouette gown that hugged her curves effortlessly. The fabric caught the light every time she moved. Her hair was pulled into an elegant updo, loose strands framing her face just enough to soften her sharp beauty. She was beautiful, and she knew it. So did the men in the room, who tried not to stare but failed anyway. Isabella felt like a princess at a ball, standing in a world built on money and power. Her eyes drifted across the gala, taking in the swirl of gowns and crystal light, and then she noticed him. His eyes, dark, focused, locked directly on her. Damian Castellano. One of the Castellano brothers, billionaires whose name alone carried prestige and quiet power. And yet, in a room full of wealth and influence, his attention never wavered. He stared at her as if she were the only thing he wanted, the rest of the gala fading into nothing. Their eyes locked for a brief moment. Her pulse quickened, and she looked down, shifting her gaze away before the moment lingered too long. Her breath caught. Damian was tall and muscular, broad shoulders, his skin smooth and unmarked, and devastatingly handsome in that unmistakable Italian way. His hair fell just past his shoulders, framing a chiseled jaw and high cheekbones so precise he looked less like a man and more like a Renaissance sculpture, the kind you'd expect to find frozen in marble in a quiet museum hall. Except he was real, very real. His eyes were dark, focused, and intense, carrying a depth that made it impossible to look away for long. A woman brushed past him, perfume floral and heavy. Another laughed loudly near the bar, champagne sloshing in her glass. Damian barely registered them. Then he saw her. She wasn't trying to be noticed. That was what caught him first. She stood near the bar, not engaging, fingers wrapped lightly around a flute of champagne she hadn't finished. Her shoulders were relaxed, her back straight. No phone, no performance. Just present. Isabella Hale. He didn't know her yet, but something in him recognized her anyway. Not attraction. Recognition. The kind that made his chest tighten for reasons he didn't yet understand. Damian shifted his stance slightly, angling himself so he could watch her without staring. He told himself it was curiosity, habit, pattern recognition. But when she lifted the glass to her lips and then lowered it again, choosing restraint instead of indulgence, something inside him stirred. Interesting. For the first time that night, Damian Castellano stayed in one place longer than necessary. Damian Castellano had learned early that power didn't need noise. Noise attracted attention. Attention attracted questions. And questions were dangerous. He stood just inside the entrance of the ballroom, jacket perfectly tailored, posture relaxed in a way that was practiced, not careless. Old money taught you that. How to look unbothered while calculating everything. The Castellano name carried weight, but not the flashy kind. It was whispered in the right rooms, passed along in private conversations, attached to institutions and investments most people never saw. The kind of wealth that didn't pose for photos. Damian didn't announce himself. He observed. His eyes moved through the room slowly, cataloging faces, body language, power dynamics, who leaned in when certain people spoke, who laughed too hard, who watched without being seen. He didn't smile much. When he did, it was brief, controlled. She hadn't grown up like this. No marble foyers, no summer homes, no family name that opened doors. Her parents had worked themselves tired every day of their lives. Honest work, long hours. sacrifice without applause. She had gone to college on scholarships and discipline, studied finances on nights when her friends went out, learned how markets worked, how money moved, how people made mistakes with it, saved aggressively, asked questions, hired the right financial advisor, read everything. Every dollar she had was earned. 2.4 million. It wasn't nothing. But in this room, it wasn't everything. Isabella took a sip of her champagne and barely tasted it. Non-alcoholic. The bartender knew. Money talked, even when it didn't drink. Tonight wasn't about indulgence. It was about observation. But still, nothing compared to the wealth circulating in this room. She lifted her glass and took a slow sip of her non-alcoholic champagne. She wasn't making emotional mistakes tonight. Not here. Not around men who smelled like power and promises. What no one knew was that earlier in the evening she had slipped the bartender a discreet amount of cash, just to make sure her champagne stayed non-alcoholic. At events like this, money bought access. Access to the right conversations. Access to the right people. Isabella glanced down for a moment, gathering herself. When she looked up, a man stood directly in front of her. Italian, olive-skinned, tall, dark hair, handsome in that devastating way, with broad shoulders. He stepped in front of her and gently took her hand, lifting it with quiet confidence. Like a perfect gentleman, he brushed his lips against her knuckles. She wore white gloves, yet she could still feel the warmth of his lips through the thin fabric. Her breath caught softly. A faint warmth spread through her, subtle but unmistakable. The simple gesture lowered her guard, easing something within her she hadn't realized was guarded. Her focus shifted entirely to him, attentive, present, drawn closer without effort. The world around them faded to a quiet blur, leaving only the warmth of his touch and the quiet pull between them. At events like this, money bought access. Access to the right conversations. Access to the right people. Isabella glanced down for a moment, gathering herself. When she looked up, a man stood directly in front of her. Italian, olive-skinned, tall, dark hair, handsome in that devastating way, with broad shoulders and icy blue-gray eyes piercing hers. The name alone carried weight. She studied him without flinching, her expression calm, unreadable. "Isabella Hale," he stated. "Damian Castellano," she replied. She leaned in just slightly and whispered, "Your reputation precedes you, Damian Castellano. What do I owe the pleasure?" A corner of his mouth curved upward. Her chest tightened. "Oh, really?" he replied smoothly. "And what does my name perceive?" She smiled, slow and intentional. "Well, Mr. Castellano, that would ruin the mystery, wouldn't it?" He was caught off guard. No woman had ever spoken to him like that. No hesitation, no flattery. His interest sharpened instantly. "Would you like to dance, Miss Hale?" he asked, extending his hand. "I appreciate the offer," Isabella said softly, "but I would not like to dance." Damian tilted his head slightly. "Really? And why not?" He stepped closer. Just enough. Isabella felt her pulse quicken. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass, knuckles whitening just slightly. She met his gaze anyway, refusing to step back. Damian watched her carefully, intrigued by the way she held her ground. "Isabella," he began. She lifted a hand gently. "Damian." The way she said his name made him pause. He took a step back, giving her space, but his eyes never left her face. Desire flickered in them, unmistakable, controlled but present. She shifted to the side and smiled politely. "Excuse me, Mr. Castellano. I need to powder my nose." He gave a small, respectful nod with a slight curtsy as a sign of respect. As she walked away, the gown catching the light with every step, Damian watched her disappear into the crowd. Something tightened in his chest. Something unfamiliar. He whispered under his breath, "Isabella Hale." Without breaking his stare, he pulled out his phone. Text to assistant, "Find out everything you can on Isabella Hale, now." Damian's reflection on the moment, perfect choice. Enzo fits Damian exactly. Sharp, discreet, elite, and loyal. The music in the ballroom swelled, violins threading through soft conversation, champagne glasses clinking like punctuation marks in a language only the wealthy seemed fluent in. Damian Castellano stood near the edge of the room, one hand tucked casually into his pocket, posture relaxed but alert. He wasn't trying to be noticed. That was the thing about men like him. They never had to try. He watched Isabella Hale from across the room, not in the way other men did, not with hunger, not with entitlement, with curiosity. She had moved away from the bar now, standing near one of the tall, arched windows overlooking the city. Miami glowed beneath her like a living thing. She looked smaller there, quieter, less like the woman everyone else was watching, and more like someone thinking her way through a moment. Damian felt something tighten in his chest. Annoying. He didn't believe in instincts. He believed in patterns, in data, in cause and effect. And yet, she didn't fit any pattern he recognized. He took a slow step closer, careful not to crowd her. When she noticed him, she turned slightly, her body angled in a way that said she was aware, but not defensive. "Still avoiding the dance floor?" he asked lightly. Isabella smiled, just barely. "Still pretending you don't know everyone in this room?" He chuckled under his breath. "Touché." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive, dark and woody, the kind of scent that lingered and spoke quietly of money and power. At the same time, he caught her perfume, a scent he couldn't quite name. Soft, subtle, intoxicating. It pulled at him without effort, drawing him closer before he even realized he'd moved. She shrugged. "Tonight feels dangerous," he cut in, a hint of amusement in his voice. She agreed without words, her stillness answering for her as he held her gaze, dark eyes intense, unreadable, edged with want. "Thank you," she replied, lifting her glass in his direction, her cheeks warming despite herself. That earned her his full attention. He turned toward her then, dark gray eyes studying her face like he was committing something to memory. She didn't look away. Her chin lifted slightly, not in challenge, but in quiet confidence. Most women leaned in when they spoke to him. She didn't. It unsettled him. "I respect that," he said after a moment. She laughed softly. "Most men don't." "I'm not most men." She glanced at him then, really looked. The tailored tucks, the stillness, the way he didn't fidget or fill silence just to hear himself speak. "No," she agreed. "You're not." A pause settled between them. Comfortable, rare. From across the room, a waiter stumbled slightly, tray tipping just enough that a glass nearly fell. Damian moved without thinking. His hand shot out, steadying the tray before disaster struck. "Easy," he said quietly, voice calm. "You're doing fine." The waiter exhaled, relief flooding his face. "Thank you, sir." Damian nodded once, already stepping back, as if it were nothing. Isabella watched the entire exchange. Something shifted behind her eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes," he replied simply. "I did." She studied him for a long second. "You notice things." He met her gaze. "So do you." A moment passed. Then softer, she said, "People think they know who I am." His expression didn't change, but his voice did. "They're usually wrong." Her breath caught, just slightly. The orchestra swelled again, the music shifting into something slower, more intimate. Couples began moving toward the dance floor. Damian held out his hand. This time, he didn't ask. He waited. Isabella looked at his hand, then at his face. Then she placed her fingers in his palm, just for one dance. And as he led her toward the floor, something neither of them could name settled quietly between them. Not attraction, not danger, recognition. And somewhere deep inside Damian Castellano, a line he'd sworn never to cross began to blur. When the song ended, they returned to where they had been standing. the music still humming softly through the room. Isabella lifted her glass and took another slow sip, eyes drifting past Damian's shoulder toward the dance floor. The music swelled gently, a classic instrumental woven with something modern. Couples moved together easily, laughing, bodies relaxed. Damian didn't rush her. That was new. Most men pushed after a no, pressed, negotiated. He didn't. He stayed exactly where he was, hands loose at his sides, posture calm. No irritation, no ego bruised, just presence. "That's fair," he said simply. "I won't steal your evening." He took a half step back, giving her space like he meant it. That's when she felt it. The absence. She hadn't expected it to matter, but it did. The moment stretched. The space where pressure usually lived felt quiet. She glanced back at him. "You're not even going to ask why," she said. He met her eyes again, steady. "You don't owe me an explanation." That did it. Isabella exhaled slowly, the tension she hadn't realized she was carrying easing from her shoulders. She set her glass down on the bar with a soft clink. "One more song," she said. "That's it." His eyebrows lifted slightly. Not surprised, just pleased. "One more," he agreed. "I'll behave." But his lips twitched slightly. A smile almost. The song faded, applause rippling gently around them as couples drifted back toward the edges of the floor. The air still hummed with music, with warmth, with the closeness they hadn't yet stepped away from. Isabella felt it first, the reluctance to let go. Damian's hand lingered at her waist, steady, familiar now. The scent of his cologne mixed with hers, something warm and understated, wrapping around her senses. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he leaned in slightly, his voice low, almost amused. "I thought you said one more dance," he murmured. "This would be third." She looked up at him, the lights catching in her eyes, her smile slow and unguarded. "I know," she said softly, "but I'm feeling quite adventurous today." Something shifted in his expression. Warmth, surprise, something deeper settling in. "Then I suppose," he said quietly, drawing her a little closer as the next song began, "I'd be a fool to refuse." The music swelled again, slower this time, and he guided her back into the rhythm, their steps falling into place as if they'd been waiting for this moment all along. And this time, the dance felt less like a choice and more like a beginning. She shook her head with a small smile. "I didn't say that." He offered his hand this time, not confident, not hesitant, just open. She looked at it for a beat, then placed her hand in his. The contact was immediate, warm, grounding. His palm was firm but gentle, guiding her toward the dance floor without pulling. When they stepped into the crowd, the noise softened. The lights dimmed. Everything narrowed to the space between them. Damian's hand settled at her waist, respectful, deliberate, not possessive. Isabella's other hand rested lightly on his shoulder, fingers brushing the fabric of his jacket. "Still think I'm trouble?" he asked quietly. She tilted her head, eyes meeting his. "I think you're interesting." He smiled then, slow, genuine, the kind of smile that softened his sharp edges, the kind that reached his eyes before he could stop it. She responded, "You're different somehow. I see power on the outside, but something softer underneath. Something you don't let others see." He stopped mid-step, his body stilled for just a second. Then he stared at her before starting back, swaying again. "You see all that from one glance?" he added, his voice lower now, curiosity slipping in despite himself. She said, "Yes." Then softly, "And Damian, thank you." "Thank you for what?" "For being willing to accept my no to the dance earlier." He laughed, a breathy sound as his shoulders loosened. "Are you testing me?" She laughed too, her fingers brushing lightly against his sleeve as they moved. "Not really, but your response surprised me," she said, watching his face closely. "Oh, really?" he responded, his hand settling at her waist, thumb pressing slightly as if grounding himself there. His posture shifted toward her, attentive now, fully present. They moved together easily, like two people who didn't need to prove anything. Her body relaxed despite herself. His steps adjusted to hers instinctively, and Isabella realized something mid-song that surprised her. There was electricity all over her body from his touch. She felt it everywhere. The chemistry was electric, and this was interesting. They stopped dancing, but even after the dance, she could still feel his touch lingering, like heat beneath her skin. Damian never left her side. He became a protective hawk. Mr. Hawthorne tried to approach, an older gentleman easing closer, but Damian put his hand on the small of her back, leaning in while talking. She didn't see Mr. Hawthorne, but Damian was making his claim. She was his. He would make her his. He stayed right beside her. Any guy that came close that night took one look and did a U-turn in the other direction. His look was stern and cold as ice. He kissed her hand at the end of the night. "Miss Hale, would you like me to use my driver for the evening?" he asked. She said, "You wouldn't mind. Do you mind if we ride together?" "No, I do not mind." "Mr. Castellano, Damian, please call me Damian." The dance and conversation were wonderful. "Thank you for the unexpected company. I had a lovely time." "My pleasure. Shall we?" He took her hand and they walked. A sleek black car appeared. Damian walked her to the front of the five-star hotel, the luxury black car waiting as the driver opened the back seat. Damian immediately brought up the glass for privacy. The vehicle pulled into her building, a luxury suite. His eyes narrowed. They had light, comfortable conversation. She said, "Thank you, but I would like to call it a night." "Thank you for the offer, Damian." "It was my pleasure." "Do you want to call it a night, or would you like me for further company?" "Let me walk you in." Damian got out and walked her through the hallway of the luxury apartment building. He kissed her hand again. She said, "Thank you again. Can we do this again? Maybe not at a gala." She laughed. "I would love that." That was the day everything between them changed. What started as a single conversation stretched into long ones. Late-night talks that weren't planned. Texts that lingered longer than they should have. Silences that felt comfortable instead of awkward. Somewhere between the laughter and the pauses, something shifted. Neither of them named it. But it was the beginning of something new for both Damian and Isabella. He dropped her off like it was nothing. Like it didn't matter. Like he hadn't spent the entire drive memorizing the sound of her laughter and the way silence settled easily between them. But the moment she disappeared behind the door, something shifted. What he felt didn't fade with distance. It followed him home, sat with him in the quiet. And by morning, it was clear. Letting her walk away wasn't the same as letting her go. That was when he stopped pretending and started pursuing her. The chase. He pursued her, not with urgency, but with intention. Flowers began arriving at her building. Thoughtful ones, elegant ones, not meant to impress the world, only her. Each delivery felt less like a gesture and more like a quiet reminder that he was thinking about her. She finally texted him, smiling to herself as she typed, "Damian, do you want to see me again? LOL. She laughed softly, almost embarrassed by how much she hoped the answer was yes. His reply came quickly. "Yes, how did you know?" More roses followed, so many that her apartment slowly transformed, petals softening every corner, the air sweet and unmistakably alive. It felt less like excess and more like joy spilling over. She texted him again. "So, should I be worried or impressed that my apartment now smells like a florist's dream?" I was aiming for impressed. Worried comes later. She shook her head, smiling. Later? Bold. "Damian, I don't do subtle very well." I noticed. So if I say yes to seeing you again, what does that look like? There was a pause this time, not hesitation but care. Something simple, coffee, somewhere quiet enough to talk. Just coffee? For now, she felt a warmth settle in her chest. And after? A walk, no agenda, just seeing where the conversation takes us. I like walks, Damian. I had a feeling you would. She glanced around her rose-filled apartment, still smiling. You're very confident for someone who just sent 80 roses. It worked, didn't it? She hesitated for only a second. I'll meet you for coffee. Good. I'll pick the place. Of course you will. Damian, tomorrow. She smiled, already imagining it. Tomorrow. You don't have to buy me gifts, she said gently. I'm more than capable. The phone rang once, then twice. Her heart quickened before she could stop it. When Damian spoke, his voice was lower than usual, not commanding, not teasing, just calm and present. Isabella. The way he said her name made her smile. Call me Bella, she said softly. There was a pause on the line. Bella, he repeated, quietly this time, like he was getting used to how it felt. I've been thinking about you. She leaned back against the counter, warmth spreading through her chest. About what exactly? She asked, her voice lighter now. You, he said simply. The way you move through the world. The way you don't bend just because someone expects you to. She swallowed, touched more than she expected. That doesn't scare you? No, he replied. It draws me in. Another pause, comfortable, unhurried. I'm not used to being told no, he admitted. But with you, it felt different, honest, and I respected it more than I expected to. She smiled softly, then said it before she could overthink it. Damian, you make me feel seen, and we haven't even been on a date yet. The line landed gently between them. I might have thought about it when I saw the roses, she added with a quiet laugh. I hoped you would, he said, warmth threading through his voice. She hesitated, then spoke honestly. I didn't come from your world. I've had to build everything myself. I don't want to lose that. You won't, he said without hesitation. That's what I admire about you. She went still, listening. I've had money for a long time, he continued, but it doesn't give you freedom the way people think it does. What does? She asked. Being able to be yourself, he said, without pretending, without performing. You have that, and I don't want to take it from you. I want to learn from it. Outside, the city hummed softly, distant and familiar. Between them, the moment felt steady, unforced, sincere. She realized then she wasn't just enjoying the conversation. She felt understood, and neither of them felt the need to rush what was coming next. The date. The car arrived at exactly 7 p.m. on the dot. She changed 3 times, stood in front of the mirror longer than she wanted to admit, studied her reflection, trying to decide what this was supposed to be. Finally, she chose a black dress that hugged her curves without asking for attention. Hair pulled back, light makeup, elegant jewelry, effortless but considered, the kind of choice that felt true. Then she changed again, into a soft sweater and fashionable ripped jeans, comfortable but intentional, paired with heels that made her feel like herself. The driver opened the door without a word. When she stepped into the lobby, he was already there, waiting. Damian looked up the moment she entered. The low hum of the space faded as his eyes found her. He took a step forward. You look. The words stalled, caught somewhere between thought and breath. She smiled, easing the moment. It's just coffee, right? He extended his hand, every inch the gentleman. Calm. Controlled. Yes, he said smoothly. As you wish. Then quieter, almost to himself. I had something else in mind, but coffee will do, for now. She placed her hand in his. They sat, Menus were set before them, coffee only, minimal, intimate. The scent of fresh espresso hung in the air, warm and grounding. She glanced at his menu, then back at him. "Are you sure you don't want dinner?" He smiled slowly, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Very sure." A beat passed. "But," he added, "I like knowing my options." They lingered longer than planned, cups cooling, as conversation slipped effortlessly from light to curious, from curious to comfortable. She felt it, that quiet shift, his warmth across the small table, the ease of being seen without effort. Damian leaned back slightly, studying her over the rim of his cup. "You know," he said casually, "this was never meant to end here." She lifted a brow. "You're saying that now?" He smiled, unguarded. "I'm saying it honestly." A pause settled between them. "There's an Italian place a few blocks from here," he continued. "Quiet, elegant, nothing flashy, just good food and better wine." She hesitated, only for a second. "I thought this was just coffee," she said. "It was," he replied smoothly. "And now it doesn't have to be." She glanced around the cafe, then back at him. Something in her softened, or maybe sharpened. "Dinner," she repeated, tasting the idea. He tilted his head. "Be adventurous." She surprised herself by smiling. "I already am." They stood. He offered his hand again, just as naturally as before. The restaurant was warm and low-lit, candlelight flickering against crisp white linens. Soft conversation filled the air, the kind of place where time seemed to slow on purpose. Once seated, she felt it fully now, relaxed, curious, open. "This," she said lightly, looking around, "feels intentional." "It is," he answered without hesitation. "So are you." She laughed softly, lifting her glass. "All right, Damian, let's see where the night goes." He raised his glass to hers, the clink gentle and deliberate. Exactly where it's supposed to. He didn't rush the silence. His gaze stayed on hers, steady, thoughtful, present. "That's not what I was expecting," he said finally. Not dismissive, curious. "But it explains a lot." She tilted her head. "What does?" "The way you're grounded," he said. "You don't move like someone chasing the room. You move like someone who already knows who they are." He paused, then added honestly, "I wasn't raised particularly religious. Belief wasn't central in my life." A moment passed. "But I respect discipline," he continued. "Conviction. People who don't abandon themselves when success shows up." His gaze softened, just slightly. "I've learned that everyone believes in something. Power, control, legacy. God." He lifted his glass, not drinking, just holding it. "The rare ones," he said quietly, "are the people who know exactly which one they serve." He set the glass down. "And they tend to be the most dangerous," he added, almost smiling. "In the best way." They talked for the rest of the night, drifting through everything and nothing. The conversation flowed easily, unforced, and something unspoken settled between them. Something neither of them tried to name, but both of them felt. That night, as they drove home, both their hearts felt quietly full, the conversation still flowing easily between them. The city lights drifted past the windows in soft streaks of gold, unhurried, as though even the night itself wished to linger a little longer with them. When they reached her building, he walked her to the door once more. The hallway was hushed, wrapped in soft light and gentle stillness, holding the warmth of everything the evening had been. She thanked him, her voice low and sincere. He leaned in carefully, almost asking without words, and brushed a tender kiss against her lips. She allowed it, softly, briefly. There was restraint in her stillness, in the small pause before she stepped back, guarding something sacred within herself. The moment lingered between them, quiet and full, heavy with all the things neither of them rushed to say. He nodded slowly, understanding, She wasn't pushing him away. She was honoring herself. And somehow, that stirred something deeper in him than desire ever had. "I understand," he said quietly, and he meant it. He stepped back, giving her space without being asked, watching as she unlocked the door, watching the way she paused before going inside, as if neither of them were quite ready to let the moment end. "Good night, Bella." "Good night," she replied. She stepped just inside, then turned back, her smile soft, warm, unguarded, not inviting, not distant, simply real. And it reached him deeper than she knew. He stood there longer than necessary after the door closed, replaying it all. The laughter, the conversation, the quiet understanding between them, the tenderness of the kiss, the strength of her restraint. What it revealed about her, and about himself. It didn't lessen what he felt. It deepened it. The hallway fell silent again, too quiet. Yet instead of frustration, something gentler settled in him. Respect. Curiosity. A growing affection sharpened not by absence, but by meaning. Most women leaned in. She had stepped back and somehow drawn him closer. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the urge to take. He felt the desire to earn. Inside, the door clicked softly behind her. She rested her back against it for a moment, exhaling the night. Not regret, not uncertainty, but peace. She thought of the conversation, the laughter, the way everything had flowed so naturally between them. The kiss, the pause, the choice. Her boundary hadn't felt like loss, it felt like clarity. She whispered a quiet thank you, not to him, but upward, for discernment, for calm, for knowing herself well enough to stop where it mattered most. And as she walked deeper into the apartment, her smile remained, soft, steady, and full of something new. That was the day everything between them changed. What started as a single conversation stretched into long ones. Late-night talks that weren't planned. Texts that lingered longer than they should have. Silences that felt comfortable instead of awkward. Somewhere between the laughter and the pauses, something shifted. Neither of them named it. But it was the beginning of something new for both Damian and Isabella. He dropped her off like it was nothing. Like it didn't matter. Like he hadn't spent the entire drive memorizing the sound of her laughter and the way silence settled easily between them. But the moment she disappeared behind the door, something shifted. What he felt didn't fade with distance. It followed him home, sat with him in the quiet. And by morning, it was clear. Letting her walk away wasn't the same as letting her go. That was when he stopped pretending and started pursuing her. Damian didn't sleep that night. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the cool glass faint beneath his fingertips. His jacket lay discarded over a chair, sleeves rolled, collar loosened. A glass of whiskey rested in his hand, untouched, the amber liquid catching the city lights below. The city pulsed with life, distant horns, flickers of red and gold, movement everywhere. But inside him, everything was still, too still. He replayed the moment again, Isabella's hesitation, the warmth of her closeness still lingering against his chest, the way she had pulled back, not in fear, not in rejection, but in choice. The way her eyes had held his, steady, unafraid, as if she had seen something in him he had never allowed anyone else to see. His jaw tightened. "Damn it," he muttered quietly, voice low against the silence of the room. He wasn't angry at her. He was angry at himself, at how easily he had wanted to cross the line, at how instinct, not thought, had moved him closer to her, at how rare it was to meet someone who didn't bend toward his power, his name, his money. She hadn't asked for anything, not attention, not protection, not advantage, and that unsettled him more than resistance ever could. He lifted the glass, finally taking a slow sip. The burn of whiskey spread down his throat, warm but hollow, doing nothing to quiet the restlessness beneath his ribs. He lowered the glass again, fingers tightening slightly around it. For the first time in a long time, desire wasn't winning. Something deeper had interrupted it. Respect, restraint, something unfamiliar. And that frightened him more than losing ever had. The night before had not ended cleanly. It lingered, in memory, in silence, in the quiet space between thought and feeling. Neither of them spoke about it in the morning, yet both carried it with them. The warmth, the hesitation, the moment that had almost become something more. By the time the sun began to fall again, the question wasn't if they would see each other, but what remained unfinished between them. And so, as evening settled and the sky turned to gold, they met again. The intensity hadn't faded, it had settled. What once felt like tension now moved with intention. Conversations grew slower, silences grew comfortable. The restraint that had unsettled him became something he respected, something he carried with him even when she wasn't there. And without realizing when it happened, Damian stopped fighting the quiet pull towards something deeper. They didn't plan to be there that long. What began as a late dinner became quiet conversation. Conversation softened into honesty. And honesty had a way of stretching time without asking permission. Eventually, they left the restaurant. No rush, no expectations. Just the quiet understanding that neither of them was ready for the night to end. They found themselves back at Damian's place. Not the version of him shaped for power in public eyes. This space was quieter, dim, lived in. Soft amber light pooled across dark wood floors, and the floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below like something distant and small, almost unreal. They sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, then closer, still not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. A quiet current in the space between them. The room carried the faint scent of cedar and clean linen. The distant hum of the city filtered softly through the glass, steady and far away. Damian ran a hand slowly through his hair, exhaling, tension leaving his chest in pieces. "I don't usually bring people here," he said. Isabella smiled softly, her voice warm and knowing. "I can tell." He glanced at her. "How?" "Because you're not performing." The words settled deeply. He shifted forward, elbows resting on his knees now, shoulders tight with something unspoken. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "And I don't know how to say it without sounding broken." She turned fully toward him, her body soft but grounded, eyes steady. "Try." He swallowed. "I'm not a good man," Damian said. "I've done things I'm not proud of. Things I justified because I thought they were necessary. Because power demands things." She watched him, not judging, not retreating, just listening. "And then there's you," he continued, voice lower now. "And somehow, you make all of that feel heavier. Like I can't hide from it anymore." A quiet breath left him. "You make me want to be better, and I don't even know what that means yet." Silence settled between them. Not empty, not cold, alive. Isabella's fingers twisted gently in her lap before stilling. When she spoke, her voice carried warmth, honesty, vulnerability. "I feel the same," she admitted, "about wanting more, about wanting better. But I don't know where this is going, Damian, and that scares me." He looked at her then, really looked, his gaze softening. "That scares me too," he said. "But I don't want to walk away just because it's uncomfortable." She nodded slowly. "Neither do I." He hesitated, then asked quietly, almost uncertain. "So, do I need to go to church or something?" The question lingered. Then she laughed, not at him, with him, soft, real, warm. "No," she said gently. "You don't have to. We can if you want. But that's not what this is. She shifted closer now, the space between them disappearing. I'm not religious in the ritual sense, she continued softly. For me, it's more relationship. I pray. I talk to God. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes I don't even know what to say. He frowned slightly, curious. You talk to him? Yeah, she said simply, like a conversation. He leaned back, processing slowly. I don't know how to do that. She reached for his hand. Her touch was warm, steady, real. You don't have to know, she whispered. You just have to be honest. He looked down at their hands, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles without thinking, grounding himself in the moment. Will you show me? He asked. Her chest tightened softly. Yes, she said. They didn't kneel. They didn't perform. They simply sat there, hands intertwined, bodies turned toward each other, breath steadying in the quiet. Bella closed her eyes first. God, she began softly. It's me, and I don't know how to do this perfectly. But I know you're listening. Damian's breathing slowed, deeper now. I thank you for tonight, she continued. For honesty, for courage, for the way you meet us even when we don't think we deserve it. Her fingers tightened gently around his. I pray for Damian. You know his heart better than I do. The weight he carries, the questions, the guilt. His throat tightened. If you're here, she whispered, let him feel it. Let him know he's not alone, that he's not too far gone, that grace still reaches. Something shifted. Damian's chest tightened suddenly. Not pain, not fear, something deeper, warmer, like a quiet presence settling over him. His breath caught. His eyes burned. He squeezed her hand instinctively, grounding himself in the moment. When she finished, she opened her eyes. Damian didn't speak immediately. He stared at the floor, jaw tight, breath uneven. I felt something, he said finally, voice low, unsteady. I don't know what it was, but it was real. She nodded softly. That's him. He turned to her, eyes glassy, vulnerable in a way he had never allowed. I don't deserve you, he said, but I want to try. I want to learn. I want to do this right. She leaned closer, resting her forehead gently against his. We'll figure it out, she whispered. Together. He kissed her then, not rushed, not desperate, warm, steady, certain. When he pulled back, their foreheads remained touching, breath shared in the quiet. I love you, he said softly, and I don't want to ruin from this. Her breath trembled. I'm here, she replied, and for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt lost. They didn't know the whole path ahead. After that night, after he felt God, the change in Damian was gradual, unannounced, unforced, but real. He became more open, softer around the edges, kinder in ways that didn't need to be announced. He respected Bella's boundaries without question, without frustration, as if something inside him finally understood that love didn't need to push to be real. They talked for hours when they were together, sometimes about scripture, sometimes about God, sometimes about life, the big questions and the small, ordinary ones. They studied the Bible together, not like an obligation, but like discovery. And every time they met, they prayed, not perfectly, not formally, just honestly. Somewhere along the way, Damian began his own relationship with God. It happened late at night most often, when the city had gone quiet and the weight of the day finally surfaced. He found himself talking to God the way Bella did, asking for direction, for clarity, for wisdom about work and business decisions he had always handled alone. And then he noticed something. After he prayed, things shifted. Meetings went differently. Decisions landed with clarity instead of tension. Outcomes that once required force seemed to resolve with ease. One day, the board pressed him hard about a particular decision. Voices sharp, expectations heavy, pressure mounting the way it always had. That night, Damian talked to God about it, not bargaining, not demanding, just laying it down. The next day, the pressure eased. The resistance softened. It was as if a quiet wind of peace had moved through his life, clearing space where stress used to live. He noticed he was breathing easier, sleeping better, carrying less weight in his chest. For the first time, success didn't feel like survival. It felt aligned. And Damian began to understand something he had never known before. Peace wasn't the absence of pressure. It was the presence of God. The change in Damian didn't go unnoticed. One evening, quietly, almost casually, he looked at her and asked, "Would you take me to church?" She paused, surprised, searching his face. "But," he added, a little more softly, "I want to go to the one you choose, the one that matters to you." Her heart softened at that. So she called her mother. "Mama," she said, smiling. They drove out of the city, past the glass towers and familiar luxury, into open land and quieter roads. Bella introduced Damian to her mother just outside the city, where life moved slower and simplicity was a way of being. Her parents' home was modest, warm, lived in, nothing polished, nothing performative. It unsettled him in a way that felt honest. The church was the same, small, simple, far removed from everything he was used to. At first, Damian was tense, his shoulders tight, his posture guarded. He didn't know where to sit, when to stand, how to belong. Then the music started, not polished, not perfect, alive. Hands clapped, voices lifted, the sound of hallelujahs and amens filled the room, not echoing, surrounding. Without realizing it, Damian began to sway to the rhythm. Something inside him loosened. The walls he carried everywhere thinned. And then, suddenly, people were praying over him. Hands on his shoulders, voices layered together, warm, steady. The next moments blurred. He found himself on the floor, overwhelmed, not in fear, but in release. It all felt like a daze. Time bent. Sound softened. Words came out of his mouth that he didn't understand. Not language he recognized, but something deeper. And somehow, he felt incredible. Light, whole. It was one of the most powerful experiences of his life. After that day, everything began to feel clearer for Damian. Not louder, clearer. Things that once rolled off him now lingered. People's intentions felt closer to the surface, easier to sense. Situations sharpened, as if the noise had been stripped away and only truth remained. He noticed things before they happened, at work, in conversations, in rooms full of people. It was subtle, but undeniable. Bella noticed it too. "That's discernment," she told him gently. "Some gifts wake up when you say yes to God." He began to dream. Not ordinary dreams, but fragments. Moments. Quiet glimpses of things that would unfold weeks, sometimes months later. They stayed with him when he woke, clear and insistent, refusing to fade. And when those moments came to pass, exactly as he had seen them, doubt loosened its grip. Underneath it all, beneath the change, the awakening, the new awareness, Damian realized something far simpler than power or clarity. He was happy. Not the kind of happiness that came from success or control, the kind that settles deep in your chest and stays. For the first time in his life. Few months later, Damian brought Bella to the rooftop of his penthouse. The city stretched out beneath them, distant and quiet, its lights softened by the night. Twinkling strands of light glowed overhead, warm and gentle, swaying slightly in the breeze. Flowers surrounded them, the same ones he had once sent to her apartment, now blooming all around her, their familiar scent wrapping the space in memory and meaning. Bella felt it before she understood it. The stillness, the intention, the way the air seemed to pause with them. Damian took her hands in his, warm and steady. His thumbs brushed lightly against her fingers, grounding himself before he spoke. When he looked at her, his eyes held nothing but certainty. "I love you, Bella," he said. "You helped me find God. You showed me peace. You loved me even when I wasn't ready. You waited for me." Her breath caught, her chest tightening as the words settled. The lights blurred for a moment as tears filled her eyes, her heart overwhelmed by the weight of everything he had become and everything they had walked through together. He dropped to one knee. "Will you marry me?" The world seemed to fall quiet. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled him to his feet, wrapping her arms around him, holding him as if she never wanted to let go. He kissed her, unhurried, full, certain, and she kissed him back, her face wet with happiness, laughter breaking softly through her tears. Above them, the lights continued to glow, and below them, the city carried on. But in that moment, everything they needed was right there in each other's arms. Months passed, and suddenly, it was the day. They were in Italy. Bella stood in front of the mirror inside a sunlit Italian villa, warm afternoon light spilling through tall arched windows and brushing against stone walls that had stood for generations. Outside, olive trees swayed gently, and the air carried the soft scent of citrus and earth. Her mother stood behind her, helping with her dress, smoothing the fabric with slow, careful hands. Her father watched from nearby, quiet pride etched into his face, his chest lifting with a deep breath as he took her in. The wedding had come sooner than either of them expected, but Damian, ever the romantic, ever a little dramatic, insisted that if he was going to marry the woman he loved, it had to be beautiful, not loud, not extravagant, just breathtaking in its meaning, bringing family together in the place that shaped him. The ceremony was small and deeply personal, set against rolling hills and open sky, the countryside stretching endlessly behind them. Stone paths, soft florals, and linen-draped chairs created a quiet elegance that felt timeless. The ceremony took place outdoors, overlooking vineyards and distant villages, sunlight warming every face in attendance. A light breeze moved through Bella's veil as birdsong and far-off church bells echoed faintly in the distance. It was simple, and it was beautiful. When Damian spoke his vows, his voice was steady, but his eyes gave him away. "To the woman who introduced me to the greatest experience of my life, God," he said. "To the woman who taught me peace, helped me love myself, and challenged me in every way." He paused, emotion tightening his throat. "I get to spend the rest of my life with you." Bella held his gaze, tears gathering as the weight of the moment settled. And standing there in Italy, surrounded by family, history, open sky, and the quiet beauty Damian had insisted on, Damian knew with absolute certainty everything he had been searching for, every restless season, every unanswered prayer, had led him right here, to her. The reception unfolded beneath the open Italian sky. Long wooden tables stretched across the stone terrace, dressed in soft linens and scattered candles. Plates of fresh bread, olive oil, and fruit caught the warm glow of light. Laughter rose easily, mingling with clinking glasses and the low hum of music drifting through the air. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Damian moved through the space with Bella at his side, his hand resting at the small of her back, protective without effort. People noticed, not the power he carried, but the ease, the way he smiled more freely, the way his attention never wandered far from her. His parents watched them quietly, pride written deep in their expressions. Her family laughed easily, welcoming him as if he had always belonged. At one point, music swelled and Damian pulled Bella into a slow dance right there among the tables. No announcement, no performance, just instinct. "This is beautiful," she whispered against him. He smiled, brushing his thumb lightly over her hand. "It had to be," he said. "I'm dramatic. You knew that." She laughed softly, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath. For the first time in his life, celebration didn't feel like noise. It felt like home. Later, when the candles had burned low and the guests drifted away, Damian led Bella through the quiet villa. They stepped onto a small balcony overlooking the countryside. The night air was cool now, scented with earth and flowers, the hills rolling endlessly beneath a sky full of stars. No music, no voices, just them. Bella leaned into the railing, exhaling softly. Damian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin lightly against her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled. "I don't think I've ever been happier." He tightened his hold just slightly, as if grounding himself in the truth of it. "I spent my whole life chasing the next thing," he said quietly. "Power, control, certainty." He paused. "I didn't realize how tired I was until I stopped." She turned in his arms, cupping his face gently. "You don't have to chase anymore." He kissed her then, slow, tender, full of promise. Not urgency, not need, commitment. When they pulled back, their foreheads stayed together, breath shared in the quiet. "My wife," he murmured, almost testing the word. She smiled. "My husband." And the world felt exactly the right size. That night, after the lights were out and the villa settled into silence, they sat together on the edge of the bed. No rush, no expectations, just stillness. Bella reached for his hand. Damian followed her lead without hesitation, fingers threading together naturally. "Let's thank God," she said softly. He nodded. They bowed their heads, shoulders touching. "God," Bella whispered, "thank you for bringing us here, for guiding us when we didn't know where we were going, for protecting us when we didn't see it yet." Damian swallowed, then spoke, quietly, honestly. "Thank you for loving me when I didn't know how to receive it, for giving me peace I didn't earn, for giving me her." His voice wavered, just slightly. "Help me honor this life, this marriage. Help me lead with humility, with patience, with love." They sat in silence after, hands still joined, hearts steady. No fireworks, no signs, just peace. And that was more than enough. After a quiet moment, Damian turned toward her, lifting his hand gently to her cheek. He kissed her, deeper this time, slower, full of warmth and certainty. And this time, she did not pull away. She leaned into him, soft and sure, her hands resting against his chest, choosing him fully, without hesitation. The room remained still around them, calm, sacred, whole. They didn't know what the future would hold. Life had taught them both that plans change, seasons shift, and certainty is rarely given in advance. There would be questions ahead, decisions, moments that asked more of them than they expected. But this time, they wouldn't face any of it alone. They had each other, not just in promise, but in practice, in patience, in choosing, again and again, to meet one another with honesty and grace. And now, they had something more. They had God, not as an idea or a distant presence, but as help, as guidance, as a steady hand woven into their days and nights, their conversations and silences, their hopes and fears. Whatever came next, they would walk into it together, held by love, anchored by faith, and guided by something far greater than either of them could see. And that was enough to step forward, even without knowing what tomorrow would bring. You've reached the end of the video, but not the end of the story. This is part of a larger journey still unfolding. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate you. I read all your comments, so like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. I'd love to know, what part of the story stood out to you the most? May God bless you, and may love find you in the most unexpected places. I'll see you in the next episode of Mrs. Gina's Love Story.